faster, maybe a little bigger.
Are these like anyone's?
Which one do I look at?
There's a couple cookies. Ah!
Which one do I
Wait,
look
hold on, there's cookies.
Oh, I want to hold
I'm almost out, but pizza is coming, and as I understand it, it's mostly, there'll be no cheese, no sauce, all anchovies.
Yeah.
You actually had me. I'm like, no.
Yeah, actually, the class third period was packed. That kind of surprised me. Paige is here.
Paige is here.
Aiden, where are you?
What's up?
Jay's here. Michaela, Emily. Claire is out of the country. And Mr. Larson's getting the pizza. You got a piece of pizza. Nicole is here. Izzy's out of the country. Summer, there you are.
Is she out of the country? No.
How about Dylan that's coming down here?
Her and Claire and
Oh,
Did that actually pop?
Well, I guess I didn't think it was that unusual.
All right.
Yeah.
Let's go. Take your notes out. Let's talk about this stuff.
let's note this up. I came ready.
I was debating whether or not to even bring in my backpack, but I was like, we'll probably have to take notes.
Wow.
Wow. No pizza for you.
One class and you couldn't even show up.
I know.
You're like 3 minutes. I was actually, the reason why I came to this one is I was late to the third one. Or the first one, the third period one.
Yeah, you were like, only 45 minutes late.
Well, no, I was like 5 minutes late, and I was like, I might as well pay my track dues and go get the lumber I need to get.
Yeah.
And come to the next
That's what I
one.
was doing. I was like, oh, I'm just gonna be late.
Who's working on a float? Okay, and then everyone else is, who's going to school? Woo! And here's the other thing. If you're, if the flow checkers come and you're here, you're
I
out.
already came.
You're in trouble. No. If your flow checkers come and you're not there, don't worry. Just tell me, and I'll make sure that you get those. Don't sit there. So take your notes on. This is the election of 1960. And by the way, this really is, the 60s is one of my favorite eras. It's really hard to go over. Hardly anything happened.
Job.
That's kind of disappointing.
I didn't
Nothing.
decide
Absolutely
anything about
nothing.
our fate.
Yeah, I always waver between that Civil War era and this era. And then Great Depression, World War II.
So every era.
So everything.
You know,
I
Just
hated the
history.
revolution.
one of the good things, you know, there's issues with being a teacher that are negative, but a few jobs I come in and talk about what I like to talk about. That's pretty good. Did you even come close to making that?
It was like,
It's on camera.
Okay, so the election of oh yeah, it's documented. We'll just prove it. Okay, so the election of 1960, the Democrat is JFK stands for,
John Fitzgerald Kennedy.
and its vice presidential nominee was Lyndon Johnson, who reluctantly accepted it. Johnson felt it was duty, but he's actually given enough power. What does the vice president do? And also breaks ties in the Senate.
Oh, no.
The Republicans, as we know, nominated Eisenhower as vice president, Richard Nixon. And Nixon looked like the very experienced one, even though they're both the same age, basically. But the big thing was the missile gap. And this is where, third period I got to this, in other classes I didn't. The missile gap was this. Kennedy's campaign convinced people that because of Sputnik, the Soviets had more long-range missiles, called ICBMs, and now the Americans were vulnerable. Remember, the Democrats the Republicans did that to the Democrats with the bomber gap back in '52. The gap. All right, this is the gap. And this is an American test firing an Atlas missile. There was actually a missile gap, and the American public believed the missile gap was the Soviets had more. How many missiles did the Soviets have that could be fired from the Soviet Union and hit the U.S.?
0.
One on election day. The U.S. had hundreds of medium-range missiles in Italy, Turkey, and Japan that could hit most parts of the United States, and had over 100 ICBMs in the U.S.
Hit most parts of the United States.
Did I say most parts of the U.S.?
Yeah.
Hit most parts of the Soviet Union.
I'm
It's really bad targeting if you hit the United States.
It's
Why
easy,
would you move
though.
the missile to Italy? You just keep it in the U.S. And the U.S. had over 1,000 bombers, that could reach the Soviet Union. And so there was a gap, and the Soviets felt really vulnerable, but the people believed the U.S., poor little United States. And then, the first ever televised debate would take place. Kennedy challenged Nixon because Nixon actually looked like he was ahead. Now, there had never been a presidential debate in history. So this would be the first. And unlike modern debates where they're really staged and all they do is talking points, this was the real debate. They answer the question, must give a real answer, a 5-minute answer, then they could ask each other questions. And it's nothing like the kind of joke debates today. Huh?
Put your
So, I'll play a little bit of a video clip and it'll show you some of this.
As he wrapped out an ambitious 50-state campaign, he was challenged by his opponent, John F. Kennedy, to a series of televised debates, the first in American history. Even when hospitalized for 2 weeks with a knee injury, Nixon remained confident.
He had a staph infection. Anybody's ever had one of those, you know how awful, just terribly painful that is. It's swollen, they pump it up through it full of antibiotics. He lost 15 to 20 pounds. He was gaunt, pale, but he was experienced. Kennedy had a bad reputation. He assumed he would win.
Anxious for the debates to begin, eager once again to use television to talk directly to the voters.
At the time, there was a feeling that this overall might be a mismatch. Nixon was the candidate who had more prominence, who had been a member of the House, a member of the Senate, and the Vice President of the United States. Kennedy, he didn't have a particularly strong reputation in Congress. There was some feeling that he was, to some extent, a playboy, that he wasn't too serious a senator. So I think people felt that Nixon had the edge. And I think Nixon felt that he had the edge.
The candidates need no introduction.
Now, I'll tell you one problem right away. The most popular suit of the day was a gray suit. That's what men wore. Gray suit, dark tie. Black and white television, you didn't think about it. So it's gray already on black and white. Then look at it. Yeah, it's like there's just a floating pale face, right?
The Republican candidate, Vice President Richard M. Nixon, and the Democratic candidate, Senator John F. Kennedy. According to rules set by the candidates themselves,
he bumped his knee on the limousine coming in. He was in agony.
Each man should...
The Nixon-Kennedy debates would forever change the way Americans chose their presidents. Political rallies and old-fashioned handshaking became much less important than the image on the television screen.
You must understand that Nixon himself had said, I don't want any makeup on for these particular debates. What I tried to explain to Dick was he has a certain characteristics of his skin where it's almost transparent. And it was a very nice thought to say, you know, I don't want any makeup, but that he really needed it.
The thing was, both men said, we're not going to have makeup. Men don't wear makeup. We're real men. It was a big macho thing. But Kennedy had been in Florida practicing and then out campaigning. So he was tanned, and then they snuck him into the men's room and put makeup on. Nixon didn't have it, and Nixon had a couple other issues. First off, he was the kind of person, there are men like this, who could literally, you know, he grunted and had a full beard. He just immediately had hair, facial hair. So he had a perpetual 5 o'clock shadow. And so he had this issue. It would immediately turn dark. And so there's a stuff called shave stick they used to sell. You know what Nair is?
Yeah. Shave stick, I've seen.
And it's like a stick deodorant. And he smeared it on his face, and that would eat the hair. By the way, it's really powerful. Put this on. And it stunk, too. And so he had that. And he has another issue. He sweated a lot. Maybe he would just sweat. And that wouldn't be a big deal except for the fact that all the bright lights because of the TV. So it's really hot. And so think about it. He's pale. He's got this goop on. No makeup, so every blemish is shown on television. That's the way it is. And then he starts to sweat. And starts to shimmer. You can kind of see it there. It starts to shimmer. And then glops of the shave stick begin to come off onto his shirt.
Wait, are you serious?
Yeah. People started calling up the local TV station saying, the man is sick, he's going to die. And it made him look just mean. And he already had the reputation of being a trickster. And so one New York TV reporter said he looked like a sinister chipmunk. That's not what you want to be called.
I don't know.
Yeah,
Oh, what happened?
You broke it. That was at 2:29.
It's definitely.
No.
So that goes 259.
I think.
Kennedy was to some extent a playboy, but he wasn't too serious.
Is an old-fashioned handshake television screen.
You must understand that Nixon himself had said, I don't want any makeup on.
These last 25 years, the Republican leadership has opposed federal aid for education, medical care for the aged.
I know what it means to be poor. I know what it means to see people who are unemployed. I know Senator Kennedy feels as deeply about these problems as I do. But our disagreement is not about the goals for America, but only about the means to reach those goals.
The first debate was costly to Nixon. The radio audience thought he had won, but the largest television audience in history had seen the vice president haggard and drawn, and had been given its first sustained look at the Kennedy style.
Kennedy looked good on television. He looked like what people wanted a president to look like. And he portrayed that image. And that is the key thing we have to get about the debate. The debate was so important because it made image the most important issue in politics from now on. It didn't matter what people said, didn't matter what people did, it didn't even matter what party they were in. All that mattered was that image on the television screen. Image became the dominant. Now remember, this had already been an issue in politics. Do you remember way back when, that log cabin campaign in 1840, McKinley, it's kind of, Roosevelt, the fireside chat, that image, but now TV can show it. And that's why this was such a big deal. Image on television. The next debate, both men had dark suits. And you know, politicians from now on always wear dark suits. Red tie. They all do it. And what else? Caked on makeup. From now on, got to have makeup. So they all put makeup on. Because television captures all the blemishes, even more today. And so it's what image they want to portray. And this is what's important then. Everything else that mattered before is irrelevant to that image.
Are you really going to change your vote over how somebody's face looks?
People vote like that all the time.
But those
Probably
are
not
people who are not the
consciously,
people
but-
you want to decide to.
The people who are undecided, that's what they decide on.
That is dumb.
And almost every election is about a third of the people that are undecided going into the last month. I know what you're saying,
Well,
and that's uncomfortable. Go ahead.
it's also like, the nicer you look, the easier it is to believe what they're saying.
Exactly.
Yeah, trust them. So that's kind of what they're like.
And even the tone of your
I would
voice and like
trust
the
the
way you're
logo.
presenting yourself is gonna affect how people think of you. Like it doesn't matter what you're saying, if you sound like.
Exactly. But you do it two different ways. Kennedy sounded smooth. Other presidents sound very smooth talking. Like President George W. Bush, he portrayed that just, I'm a regular guy. And that too was very, very, very effective. Yeah, there's different ways to do it. Obama is a much greater, an orator giving a set speech. He's fantastic at it. He's a different style, but they're just different sides of the same coin. It's hard to imagine the presidents before Kennedy ever being elected. A lot of them. Because, can you imagine Taft being elected? Not a chance. And so, if image is important, if image matters, and you got to get it on the new media, then what became the most important thing in politics?
TV.
TV ain't free.
Money.
Business.
The money to get on TV. And thus, as image becomes more and more important, money becomes more and more important. And as money becomes more and more important, the people who give the money have even more influence than ever before.
What?
They find that fascinating.
The election, there were two more debates, but no one watched it. This first debate did everything. And, like this is turned out, my projector is not very good, I'm sorry. I blame society. I blame Nixon. And the blue states are Kennedy, and even though the Electoral College is a pretty big victory for Kennedy, look how close the popular vote was, one of the closest elections in history. 49.7 to 49.6. A few votes different in Chicago or parts of Philadelphia, and Nixon would have been president. Just a few hundred votes. Oh, I know you see this. These were Southerners who voted. The electors voted for Harry Byrd, who was a segregationist senator from Virginia, because of Kennedy's support for civil rights. Now, I didn't make a slide for this, but Kennedy's elected just barely. Oh, by the way, Nixon was humiliated. I mean, he really thought he was going to win. He would try to run for governor of California 2 years later and would be trounced. And Nixon blamed the press, said, you won't have Dick Nixon to kick around anymore. And they thought Nixon was gone. Nixon is never gone. I'm convinced Nixon will run again. He's been resting for 21 years. Yes. He's been 6 feet under for 25 years, but he's fit and ready. But I forgot to put a slide for this. Write down the industrial military complex. Oh, I'm sorry, the military industrial complex. It's up on the board. Write that down. This was an Ike's farewell address.
Just like a new thing?
It's right after the election.
Okay.
It's Ike's farewell address. Ike warned of a military industrial complex. Sometimes it would be called the industrial military complex. It should be on there. Isn't it on there? I'm still here.
I think it is. I think it says, I'm pretty sure it is.
And this was his warning that there would be a. Wow, I didn't put that down. Boy, I should have. All right, so let's get to this really quick. What it was is that Eisenhower warned the American public. He warned them that there is too much influence in this cabal of generals who want more size of the military, industry who wants to sell more weapons in the U.S. but also all around the world, and the politicians that they back and give money to it. Remember, money's becoming more important. This cabal, the military-industrial complex, that would do everything possible to exaggerate the threat to the United States. To do what?
To sell more weapons.
Sell more weapons, have more generals, politicians get more money. He warned the public. He warned them. And he would be shockingly clairvoyant. Because he predicted this will lead to untold influence by rich industrialists. There'll be exaggerated threat, a big army, and war after war. And that's kind of what happened. And so he would, of course, be ignored. Kennedy looked totally different. Kennedy had a different style. He wanted to look presidential. He wanted to look tough against communism, because he said we got to stop that missile gap, but the problem was he barely won. And so Kennedy's program, fitting in with his idea that he's young, the first president ever elected in the 20th century, would be called the New Frontier. And I put in the main elements of it, and the thing about it is that this was very much like the New Deal and the Fair Deal. Does that make sense? Now, civil rights, what's Medicare? Healthcare for whom? Yeah, the elderly. The idea was the government would be the sole insurer for the elderly. So he kind of went away from, Truman, remember, he had for healthcare for everybody. But also, urban renewal. What's happening to the cities?
Plumbing?
This is what's happening. You're right. Why is that happening? Remember the suburbs? Everybody who could afford it was leaving the city and moving to get a nice home in the suburbs. What's left in the cities? Poor. Who's paying the taxes now to fix up the city? To clean the streets? To have schools? The money's gone. What do you think's happening in the cities?
Going downtown.
Crashing. It happens shockingly
So
fast.
suburbs aren't cities, but
Suburbs are not part of the city. They usually incorporate to a different city. They have their own different communities. So the cities were going broke. And you see the remnant of this today. The urban decay by the 1970s. Heck, New York would go bankrupt. Cleveland went bankrupt. Detroit went bankrupt many times. Raising the minimum wage, he wanted a Keynesian-style tax cut that would be geared towards the lower class, even though it was kind of an iffy tax cut. Vague anti-poverty measures. Poverty was still well over 25%, even though it dropped dramatically. And then a dramatic increase in defense spending. But because of the Cold War and Kennedy's political, his inability to get anything done politically, the skills to be elected are not the same as the skills to govern. And as image and TV become more important, those skills separate even more. Or somebody might be really good at getting elected and they can't get any bills passed in Congress and has no idea how to deal with it. Kennedy couldn't deal with it. They thought Kennedy was a joke when he was in the Senate. He was kind of an affable guy. And so none of this happened. Kennedy didn't win, didn't get any of these except defense. Kennedy would trigger the biggest peacetime military buildup in history up to that time.
Didn't Eisenhower want to cut defense before him? So did it go higher than it was before Eisenhower?
Significantly higher.
Okay.
A massive increase in defense spending. Massive increase. In fact, Kennedy, this was really his only success. The last speech he was going to give, right before he was assassinated, because he had so few successes, was to brag about an increase in defense spending and victory in South Vietnam. Yeah. But I know some of you are thinking, but I want to play a Kennedy game. Yes, you could have bought the New Frontier game with his rocking chair. I just thought that was really funny. It's a reverse twist on a favorite board game.
What's the favorite board game?
I'm not sure. But it is the funnest political game of the century.
The game,
It's
and
the
it's
only
the game
political
no
game
one
of the
can win.
century.
Huh?
The game nobody can win.
Okay, the Bay Pigs. He was immediately presented as president with the CIA plan to invade Cuba. Remember, the CIA was playing an army of exiles in Guatemala that would invade Cuba, just like what happened in Guatemala 7 years earlier. And the CIA would act like they had nothing to do with it, but of course this was a CIA plan held by the Navy. The plan was they would invade southern Cuba at a place, the little bay here, right here called the Bay of Pigs. The people of Cuba will rise up, overthrow the tyrant Castro, and freedom will be on the march. They'll put in the dictator they want. Kennedy didn't like this plan. Not that Kennedy didn't like plans like this, but it wasn't his plan. You know. But he had no choice, he felt. And so they carried it out. April 1961. So he'd just been president for 2 months. 3 months, I'm sorry, 3 months. It was a disaster. They landed at the Bay of Pigs. Nobody joined them. They fought for Castro. Castro was really popular. He kicked out Batista, who was a horrible dictator. And then the place they invaded, this is swamp. It's surrounded by swamp, so they couldn't get out. They were bottled up. Very quickly, it was a disaster. The CIA then went to Kennedy and said, can we bomb? Let's bomb. Let's bomb now. Invade, we got to do it. And Kennedy said, no, it's not working. He would get a lot of dissent within the army saying, you weren't tough enough, we should have invaded Cuba. This would turn into a political disaster that Kennedy would take full responsibility for, and he would blame the CIA.
What?
They told me it worked. He believed him.
But you can't take full responsibility and then blame someone else for it.
He didn't blame them publicly.
Oh.
But he kicked out Allen Dulles as head of the CIA, and even though Kennedy liked operations like this, he's going to do it himself. But we're skipping ahead a little bit to Vienna. Vienna, because 2 months after the Bay of Pigs, it had already been decided that Khrushchev and Kennedy would meet in Vienna to try to salvage something after the disaster when the U-2 was shot down a year earlier. And this was a disaster, an unmitigated failure. They came together in Vienna, Austria, and you have two politicians who feel vulnerable. Kennedy, vulnerable after the Bay of Pigs, so he has to prove he's tough, doesn't he? And Khrushchev, who a couple things. Khrushchev was humiliated by the whole U-2 incident a year earlier, and Khrushchev has another problem. Looking back at it, he saw Kennedy as a young pup, so he thought I could browbeat him. So what's this meeting going to be like?
Both acting out their
struggle.
Yeah.
Gonna be
You and I
great.
can handle this. Nothing was accomplished. It was a failure. And both men left with the feeling, this feeling, that war is inevitable. We're as close as we've ever been. Oh, going the wrong way. And so, there's Life magazine showing them both. And what was the big issue? Berlin. The big issue at Vienna, I know there's atmospheric tests. By the way, after Vienna, the Soviets exploded the 20 megaton bomb in Siberia.
Is that the biggest bomb?
Yeah, the biggest bomb ever exploded. That's 20 million tons of TNT. If you go on YouTube and watch it, it's wow. It's frightening.
They have it on YouTube.
Yeah, there's a film on it.
Could they ever make that again or whatever?
Oh, sure. The U.S. had 40 megatons. They just never exploded them. Sleep well tonight. This is a map of Berlin. Remember, Berlin's within East Germany in the Soviet occupation zone. And what was happening is called the brain drain. Beginning in the mid-50s, but accelerating all through the decade into the 60s. At first, hundreds, then thousands of Berliners, but people all over the satellite countries controlled by the Soviets were going to Berlin, East Berlin, crossing over to the west and staying. The border was wide open. By agreement of the four occupying powers, this was open. You could go back and forth. Remember, this was never going to be a permanent thing. And so they were going over into West Berlin, and then what were these people from the East doing? Staying. And it's called the brain drain because a lot of the most highly educated people realizing that all the promises of this communist paradise were not coming true in these totalitarian states. They're leaving. That's what Khrushchev said. You've got to stop this.
Wait, so the East Berliners went over to the West?
Yeah. But people from like Czechoslovakia were coming to East Berlin and then leaving.
Okay.
And that is actually what they gave the American soldiers, because to the American point of view, West Berlin was like a little sea of democracy, a little island of democracy in a sea of freedom.
In a sea of freedom?
Did I say a sea of freedom?
Yes. I'm like, what?
Yeah,
Let's start over.
yeah.
An island of democracy in a sea of slavery. Is that better?
Yeah. It's a big
It's, six in one hand,
Slavery.
slavery in the other hand. Okay. And so, this is what did Khrushchev do? And the East
Built
Germans
the
did.
wall.
At first, they laid barbed wire. So no one could cross back and forth. So let's say you're from the West and visiting family members in the East, you're stuck forever. Well, until 1989.
Well, they wouldn't even let.
No.
I remember reading somewhere, and it was like a picture, and the soldier, I think he got shot and killed by bringing a child over to the other side where his parents were.
He was lifting him over and shot him.
I mean, it's so sad.
Who shot? It wasn't the U.S.
East German. They're East German guards. And then that night they built the wall. Very hastily they built. At first they built just a crude wall, then built a much more efficient cement wall. And then two walls. And these are in the West, just literally, you had family members on the other side. People were living in the East because rents were lower, but working in the West. All of a sudden it's just cut off. No way to get back and forth now. And
It was literally overnight.
literally. Yeah, they barbed wire to keep everyone out, and the wall came up. And it was really crudely built. They built a really thick, well, it's not that thick, but reinforced cement behind it. And That became the symbol. That's an East German guard making a break for it.
Like to the west?
Yeah, is that a good picture? He made it. This is looking down from the Reichstag. There's buildings here now. Back then it was all a killing ground. Anybody in that killing ground would be dead. Landmines, attack dogs, guard towers, machine guns.
Is that from World War II or from this?
This is from, that's
So like
the Berlin
if
Wall.
anyone would die, like,
If anybody, this is on the east. So if anybody of these crossed into that area, there was one warning, then they shoot you.
So is it similar to the DMZ?
Even, yeah, it's like the DMZ now. And there were some people from the east who tried to make it over. There's only a tiny little bit of the wall left, but they have red bricks in the ground, exactly where the wall was. And so what you have there basically is an island within here. And then all the road connections had walls all the way into the west. It just was isolated. There were a few checkpoints.
couldn't you come underneath or?
People tried to tunnel, but they were watching.
No, I mean like, just go around the city of Berlin. Like if you're coming like this.
Oh no, they built the wall all the way around.
But that's American territory, isn't it?
No.
They built the wall here.
Berlin's in like the
Oh,
middle of.
so what happens to like American citizens trying to get out of?
No, there's still the three roadways, three rail. Remember those corridors?
Yeah.
Those are still there. They just put walls on them. And so you couldn't leave the Autobahn. You could drive there, but you couldn't leave, and there were guards at every exit.
Why would you go?
And they. And
Well, there were 3 million people, Westerners living in Berlin. There's a brigade of British, French, and American soldiers there.
And
And they're fine. It's just on the western side, or the eastern side that's the problem.
Yeah, in the West, it was like an island of democracy.
so they did this because they thought that if people thought that they could keep leaving, it would show that their system was wrong.
Exactly.
You're not proving the point you think you are by building a wall
You're
to keep
ruining
them
now.
in.
Here's the deal. That showed you Khrushchev's problem. How do you convince people of your system is good if you have to build a wall to keep them there? You just said his problem. And so this was a really defensive move by Khrushchev. I mean, this is like, oh my God, we're in trouble. But this would become the symbol of the Berlin Wall. And to many people in the West, it seemed like they're surrounding West Berlin to take it. This is a precursor to war. And tensions did go up, and the Berlin Wall would become a symbol. This isn't one, the Checkpoint, the most famous one, Checkpoint Charlie. There's a really good museum if you go there, the Checkpoint Charlie Museum. And a couple months later, there was a standoff with American tanks and Soviet tanks. And Lucius Collins, the general in command of the U.S. brigade there, actually ordered the tanks to open fire, but they didn't. The order was countermanded right before it got there. If they would open fire, let me just put it this way, as I said to the last group, we wouldn't have to worry about the AP exam in a week and a half.
Because the world wouldn't be there anymore?
Well, we wouldn't care. And Kennedy would give one of his most famous speeches. He went to we didn't actually say that, but he went to the Berlin Wall 3 months after they built the wall, 4 months after they built the wall, and he gave a very dramatic speech. And in the speech, Kennedy made it very clear that the United States considers Berlin, the U.S. government, the Berlin as American territory. An attack on Berlin is equivalent of attacking Washington, D.C., and we will defend it 100%. Basically, he's trying to reassure the West that we will defend it. And there, to make it clear, he began the speech and ended it, and it's written, this is Kennedy's note cards, and he wrote it down phonetically so he could get the German right, because he didn't speak German. Because this is not how you spell these words in German. It's ICH, not ISH. But it's Ich bin ein Berliner. He had it phonetically spelled, which said, I am not a citizen of Berlin, but I am a citizen of Berlin. That's how they said it, because he doesn't actually live there. And so he had to say it in a way that I'm not there, but I live there. But it's also a way to say, it's a way slightly improper, but a way to say what?
I'm a donut.
I'm a jelly donut. Nobody who heard the speech thought he said I'm a jelly donut. Everybody knew what he said. But then a few people got clever. And after the fact, yeah, he said he's a jelly donut, and people got a laugh about it. And there were little pictures of jelly donuts, and I got a little thing of a jelly donut in front of the Berlin Wall. I bought it in Berlin. No, we did not say it. Nobody thought he did it. Everybody knew exactly what he meant, but it still makes for a funny little joke. And it was a great speech, but in reality, oh, isn't that a good cover? Isn't that good? It actually was a stalemate. It eased tensions. By not having the brain drain, the Soviets and the East Germans didn't have this big crisis, and so it actually alleviated problems. These are actually West Germans in West Berlin taking their picture in 1980, in the 80s. This is in the 80s looking down the Brandenburg Gate. That's one of the guard towers. And no, we got plenty of pizza coming soon.
Eventually.
I promise. Mr. Larson went and got it.
So the Berlin Wall led to a stalemate?
Yeah.
Or was this like after?
The Berlin Wall led to a stalemate.
Which was a good thing.
Yeah. It actually alleviated tensions, even though the wall was scary if you lived there. It lessened the threat of the Soviets, freaking out over the brain drain. But the wall became the symbol of the Cold War. Yeah.
Which side is which on that picture?
On this side, this is the West. That's the East.
Looks like the East.
This is a big, huge park called the Tiergarten, a massive park. And
I love all the graffiti that's.
Yeah, it's all on the west side. You could get to that side of the east. You got there once, and that's it. My sister-in-law married a Berliner. He grew up in the American section, and actually, it'd be over here about another mile where they would go. It's now called Potsdamer Platz. They would go when he was a kid, and they would like boost each other on the shoulders or get something, and they'd stick their head over the wall and yell insults at the East German guards, so they pointed their guns at him. Yeah.
I had a friend who lived here about 5 years ago, and his grandmother climbed the wall from East Germany into West Germany and then flew to the U.S. from West Germany.
When?
1985?
Well, she might have been shot. 89 is when the wall came down.
It was somewhere in the 80s, maybe early 80s, I think.
Well, that means, if you climb over the wall, that means you had a very elaborate way to do it. I want to know the whole story.
Like 8 feet tall?
Yeah, and there's one section about a mile long left. It's really good to have a kind of a museum set up. You can see what it was like. But naturally, what that meant is Operation Mongoose. And what's Operation Mongoose? As we all know, the best way to attack Cuba is to drop furry little. No, not as many as we thought. We got lots of pizza. Yeah, most of them came third period. Okay.
Oh, shit.
Yeah, I know.
You're just going to have like a half a pizza.
Yeah, I ordered 3, and I thought, but almost everyone came fourth period. Third period. So I have good news for all of you.
We can feed our friends.
No pizza for you. I'm going to save it.
Yay.
Yeah.
Thank you, Mr. Larson. All right, let me go to finish. I'll tell you about Operation Mongoose. Yes, and of course you can have it.
Here, all I need is.
Everyone, come on, let's get some pizza. Quick. You want these? Come on. I got the most basic kind. Pepperoni and cheese.
And
lots of anchovies.
We're just
Why did I do that? Can someone put that pizza up on a table? That's really one of the dumbest things I've done. You're not leaving until you finish this pizza. Yeah.
If you have extras and you don't have anything to do with it, I'll take it. Because I promised I would buy pizza on the way home anyway to my food.
I'll give a little bit, but I think I'm going to, if I do this, I'm going to get
Oh.
Everybody use a this.
So grab all the pizza you want.
You
You want a piece? Come on. You go ahead.
A real man.
Oh, are you talking to me?
Oh, I got
Thank you, Mr.
But you guys came in. This is good. Well, now the thing is too. Costco, I gotta give them this. Even though, it's greasy because they actually use really high quality cheese. It's not like the little bits of plastic you use at Little Caesars.
Hey,
Whoa, I like that.
don't hate on Little Caesars.
And it's pretty amazing how much pizza you get for $10.
Oh, I know.
It's a pretty darn good deal. I should have maybe got more cheese. I just kind of winged it. I think you guys ate a lot. That's good.
You have multiple vegetarians in here. You probably should have.
All right, so let's get this done then. What's mongoose?
That's what I was thinking too. Like, there's a lot of it.
Operation Mongoose was the plan to drop snake-fighting rodents from India onto Cuba. Hundreds of them, knowing that Castro could never handle the influx and his Cobra army will be crushed.
This is where Izzy would go, wait. No, Jocelyn would have written that down. And Izzy would go, wait. Nuh-uh, really?
That's
She's
exactly
so
what she
cute. Where is she?
She's in Salt Lake City.
Oh, that's right.
So, Operation Mongoose was a plan to assassinate Castro.
Is that what Black Ops 2 is about?
Do we have no napkins?
Yeah, there's just.
Yeah, I got paper towels over here.
It is though.
Right?
Yeah. You totally tried it.
And,
Yeah, no, I've been thinking about
sorry, I thought
Yeah, me
I
too.
forgot to
I
put these
have
out.
to.
Oh, you're good.
I planned it as one for everybody. And here's the deal.
I might just need the whole roll though. Let's be honest with ourselves.
So this was going to be a plan to use the CIA and the Mafia to kill Castro. Why the Mafia? Because Castro kicked out the mob from their casinos. Didn't I give you?
Okay. I don't like sharing.
Thanks, bro.
That could be your campaign.
Bro. What?
Okay, you started this class by saying folks.
Okay, so
Don't judge me.
Don't even talk.
this is actually the secret order. This is all in secret. And they had various elaborate plans. One almost worked, where a former mistress of Castro, got into his room when he was in New York City to speak at the UN and actually pulled out the gun to shoot him, but Castro, disarmed her. But there were other plans that Castro knew bits about, like he liked to go beachcombing, so put a mine on a seashell so he lifted up and exploded.
Really?
Yeah, they wanted to put like a chemical into his wetsuit that would make all his hair fall out, so his signatory beard would fall out and he'd lose face. They were going to try to figure out ways to get him to take LSD, so he'd act all crazy. LSD. The CIA was just experimenting with this as a truth serum.
So the CIA did it.
Actually, that's what LSD is. Yeah,
That's funny.
they did secret tests on people to see what LSD could do, and that's how it got out. And lastly, they even planned on exploding cigars to sneak one in. And actually, they got one in there, but it was like twice the big of the regular as his other cigars. And something's wrong here. But this is my favorite Mad Magazine cover. They didn't know anything about this, but that's pretty good in 1962. No one in the U.S. except for a small little group knew about mongoose. Oh, I forgot to add something. Robert Fitzgerald Kennedy, RFK, Kennedy's younger brother, he ran this because Kennedy didn't trust the CIA. Robert Kennedy was also the Attorney General. So I want you to think about this. The most important law enforcement agent in the United States is working with organized crime to illegally assassinate another leader.
Oh, good.
That's always good.
And if the president does anything illegal, he's the general that will.
Technically, yeah.
Mostly.
Yeah, this is there's some conflict of interest here. Who knew that Castro was going to be was trying to be assassinated?
Castro?
Yes, and he knew who did it. And they already had the Bay of Pigs, an American invasion. He knew. He's nervous. Who else is nervous? Khrushchev. Khrushchev felt very weak. Vienna was a disaster. You build a wall, yeah, that's weak. And the Soviets did not have near as many missiles. And in fact, the Soviet missiles have liquid fuel. Liquid fuel can only be loaded right before you launch it. And so they were there's some problems with that, at least the Soviet time. The Minuteman I missiles that the United States was literally, at this time, 1962, I don't know why I'm doing this, they were putting in a maelstrom. The first ones were solid fuel, so they could be ready to fire immediately. By the way, that's why they're in Montana, Wyoming, and North Dakota. Solid fuel for missiles degenerates in humid climates. That's why they're here.
Did we try to assassinate Khrushchev?
No.
Why not? I mean, that sounds really bad.
No,
Why
they
not?
didn't want it. They did it for Castro, but they didn't want the superpowers doing an assassination game, because that could lead to World War III.
Yeah.
So that's actually not a bad question.
Why? Yeah.
No, I mean, when you say, why did we kill him?
I didn't mean it like that.
So, Khrushchev feels weak. Castro feels weak. Do you see
Castro feels weak?
Castro feels weak because the Americans tried to invade it, they're trying to kill him. And the America's a huge country. Khrushchev feels weak. Do you see a happy marriage?
Oh.
Isn't that picture awesome?
That's adorable.
And I love this. Okay. So what they both need is a deterrence. To deter an American attack. This is a cartoon actually from the 70s, but it's a good one. Since both sides built up enough weapons to destroy the world many times, they can't use them, can they? You use them, you kill yourself. So what's the next war going to be fought with? Isn't that clever? By the way, they had a name for this. It was called Mutually Assured Destruction. Acronym. Mutually Assured Destruction.
Mad.
MAD. Deterrence was MAD. We're leading to the Cuban Missile Crisis.
Oh, Kennedy.
And the Cuban Missile Crisis, and this cartoon is a great one because it shows the futility of the nuclear arms race. Here they are, both sitting on the trigger, fingers on, or sitting on a bomb, fingers on a trigger, arm wrestling. But if you win, what happens?
The other person gets blown up.
Not even that. If Kennedy wins,
Under the trigger.
it will under the trigger anyways. Even if you win, you lose. It's a good cartoon.
So basically, just stand up and walk away.
Best case scenario. By the way, that's the world I grew up in.
Arm wrestling?
Arm wrestling?
Yeah, I was in the arm wrestling circuit. Eastern Europe. Yeah.
But you know that if he's in office, at any moment you can just have it press a button and end the world.
Oh yeah. They fall. By the time they started having ICBMs, so when Kennedy was president, there was an Army or an Air Force colonel following him around with a briefcase, handcuffed to his arm, and then it was at first it was just a list of numbers, but then it became an instrument where you could plug in the nuclear codes and launch the missiles. They call it the football.
Oh, nice.
And they still have it. They still have a guy following Obama. He's always there with the football.
What, like handcuffs?
Handcuffs to his wrist. You can't tell. It just, you see all these guys with, and you can't see the handcuff. It's always there.
It just seems like a bad
How
idea.
important would you
Just
feel?
cut off his hand if you want to steal the football. Like,
You guys are psychotic. Let's kill Castro, handcuff. I gave you pizza.
Actually, I was trying to kill Khrushchev, not Castro, but.
All right, so
If we actually wanted to kill Castro, I'm pretty sure we could have done it.
they tried.
I don't.
So
those are like really
they wanted to
wacky.
do it and not. Now remember, they wanted to do it and start World War III. And so, October 14th, 1962, a U-2 over Cuba on an illegal mission. What did they find? Missiles. They found short-range Soviet missiles. Here are the actual pictures. And they were building launch facilities. And these missiles could hit most parts of the United States. The missiles, the short-range ones could reach Florida, but the medium ones could reach Washington, D.C., and they had a few longer-range ones that could reach almost the entire United States. And how long would it take for a missile to get from Havana to Washington, D.C.?
A couple minutes?
Yeah, about 10 to 12 minutes. This was a Soviet deterrent to the huge American advantage in weapons, nuclear weapons. And Castro would deter a war. But what? This was a foolish, insane move. Because no American, let's just write this down, no American president could allow missiles to be that close. They couldn't allow it. And so Kennedy had to get them out. And this is going to lead to, by the closest to nuclear war, a couple different occasions, to nearly blowing the world up.
Huzzah.
What a great way to finish. The DBQ will be due on Tuesday.
Sunday.
Sunday. Why? Okay, everybody will be due on Tuesday except, of course, Chapultepec. Turn it in. It's half your yearly grade. Have a good weekend, everybody. We'll see ya.
Grade. Not our
You bet.
semester, quarterly.
Yearly.
We have a yearly grade.
And Stoll, keep going through those review lists. I trust me, the review session, I can go through a lot. It's a great way to review. Wednesday will be the first one, and like at 6. I gotta do, I don't want to go too late, obviously. And then Sunday. And we gotta do it Sunday because
Starting at 6 or?
Yeah, starting at 6.
Okay,
So this Wednesday then?
This Wednesday and this Sunday.
6 o'clock.
Yeah. I'm gonna do my first AP Euro one.
Are they both
this Sunday.
doing, you do both of them?
You really should. What I do is, I do for both, I do a couple little things, some basics, you know, some tips, some hints about the test. I do one about DBQ, the essays, I do some tips and hints for the multiple choice.
I'm just asking, I
you-
didn't know the nature of them.
No, I'm just telling you, I'm just telling you.
Okay.
So there'll be some things, and you understand why I don't tell you until then. And then,
Okay.
and then I will, you know, I have that huge packet. And so then I answer questions from the packet. And that is a great way to review, because then we know, you know,
What we're hitting.
yeah, instead, when I first started doing it, I would be like, we're reviewing. And it was like,
And no one comes, because.
well, no, they all came,
Oh, I know.
but it was like, we didn't really have,
Passive overview, didn't have anything.
yeah, we didn't have like an outline to go on. And so I made this, and it's worked really well. Yeah, Jay.
No, this is probably not going to make you very happy.
What now?
I'm not going to be here next week after about Monday.
Where the hell are you gonna be?
Spokane.
Why are you going to Spokane?
I have a livestock show.
Well, I'm not, I mean, you know, I mean, this is a little pain for you, but you're taking the test, you're gonna miss a ton.
Yeah.
Now, I know stuff happens and it comes away, it's just really bad timing.
Yeah, I know.
In fact, you know, I promised I'll try to record the classes, but, you know, you're the one, you know, I get annoyed.